this country, we lock up 6 to 10 times more people than any other industrialized nation in the world. We have 1/4 the population of China, but we lock up more individuals than Russia and China combined. The vast majority of individuals that we tend to lock up tend to be black and brown. The most common denominator amongst the people that we lock up is not necessarily race, though. It's actually poverty. We lock up an alarming number of poor black folks, an alarming number of poor brown folks, an alarming number of poor white folks. And even if we look at federal investment in terms of housing and education between 1990 and 2000, which is predominantly a Democratic administration, we saw a $19 billion decrease in spending on federal housing, but we saw a $21 billion increase on the spending on building of prisons during that time. And if you want to be very reductive and strip back the layers, you'll then come to the conclusion that the #1 housing program the federal government has for poor folks in this country is the building of prisons. And then, since it's black enterprise, we got to talk about following the money, of course. And so then we have to talk about the privatization of prisons, and we also have to talk about who's getting wealthy off prisons. So the one of the #1 and strongest lobbying unions in this country is the Correctional Officers Union. 29 people get paid every time a young black male is arrested in that chain of payment. We have, on the federal and state level, incentivized prisons and unions to incarcerate and lock us up. Now, let's juxtapose this idea of how and why have we not incentivized public institutions such as education institutions to actually educate our youth as opposed to lock them up. We know that every $1 spent in early childhood education and in actually bolstering our public education services leads to a $7 savings on the backside of not having to lock somebody up, because it's appalling when you realize that it costs more money to lock someone up than to send somebody to Harvard. Yet we have institutions telling us, and federal and state governments telling us, we don't have the money to actually send these kids to school, but we do have the money to send them to prison. And so once you really start to understand this and the gravity of this, you can start to juxtapose that you say, well, why would you talk about education and prisons in the same light? You have to talk about where's the money going. You know, particularly when you hear everyone talking about the lack of money available in the education sphere to actually bring students in, to actually develop the students even before they get here. And you know, if you really want to talk about what's going on, I know we're at UCLA, but what's going on at HBCUs is horrendous. It is horrendous, y'all. And so this is a conversation that has to be had. It's talking about incarceration is a conversation that there's very little political will around this issue, because we tend to continue to elect politicians that run around and say that they're tough on crime rather than what they should be is smart on crime. But that's our fault. And we allow these lobbyists, and I'm not saying that every correctional officer is bad. I'm not saying that every CO is wrong and they're mean, they're this, they're that. We just have to understand where the money goes.